people still keep jumping on here as we get going. So welcome to our first Sunday seminar. We're going to be talking today about maintaining a work-life balance between school, between coaching, between life, and trying to work things through in balancing those things so that we can sustain what we're doing. One of the key things that we are interested in trying to do is extend the lifespan of coaches, so that coaches can keep coaching and working with kids and improving situations for themselves. So our main presenter tonight, by the way, I'm Joel Sullivan. I'm the executive secretary for the Iowa Girls Coaches Association, and I'll be kind of starting things, and I'm going to be maintaining kind of a Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and throw those in the chat, and I'll maintain kind of a Q&A. And then we'll come back to those as we get towards the end of the seminar. Our main presenter tonight is going to be Kurt Clausen. Kurt Clausen is a former rival of mine. We were in the same conference for many years, coached against each other. Good friend as well. We had a lot of really good games and battles and yelled at each other a lot and went through
more you than me, but
but we had have both recently retired from coaching and from teaching. So Kurt's kind of been working with our Iowa Girls Coaches Association, focusing on mentoring and trying to help bring along young coaches, because as we all know, all of the research shows that if you can make it past year 3 as a coach, you've got a much stronger likelihood of staying in the profession for a much longer time. And so we're trying to advocate more for coaches, advocate more for coaching, and advocate for more professionalism in what we do. So Kurt, I'm going to let you kind of take the stage, and then I'll just kind of move into the background and start working through the idea of the keeping the track of the questions in a separate document. So like I said, anyone, if you have a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and then we'll come back to that when we get to the end of the seminar. Kurt, go ahead.
thanks, Joel. Appreciate everybody participating in our webinar. And I know we have a lot going on at this time of the year, and everybody's hopefully on holiday break and able to spend a little bit of time, relaxing and getting plenty of family time in. So we wanted to look at a topic tonight that is something that came up a lot on the survey that we sent out to girls basketball coaches throughout the state. How to take care of this work-life balance and how to keep things in perspective as we're doing our jobs, but also as we're trying to have a personal life with family and keep those relationships. So we are excited to have with us tonight Scott Jarvis, who's the president, chairman. I'm not sure what to call you, Scott, but of the Niceville High School.
Most people don't, Kurt. So that's okay.
The National High School Coaches Association. Scott's also been a long time AD in the state at Newton, and was also the president of our Iowa Alliance Conference athletic directors group. So got to work with him the last 2 years with that. And he's actually going to be kind of taking us through some main points about how to maintain that work-life balance. And as Joel said, we really want you to jump on the chat. If you have comments or questions or suggestions, please put those in there, and we'll sure to bring those up. So Scott, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, coaches, I have to start off by just saying thank you for what you do. Many times you have a thankless job. And I'll just go right back to what Joel said is, we need to keep good people in this profession. Our kids need you. Your kids need you. And there's very few people that have that calling to be a coach. And to Kurt and Joel's point, it takes really special people to be great coaches. So I appreciate what you do. I appreciate what you do for your kids, your school, your community. And I know it's not always easy, but the impact that you can have on your student athletes is so tremendous. You've got this great opportunity and this responsibility to utilize this time that you have with kids. And it's a tough job. It's maybe one of the toughest jobs in the world. You got to deal with a lot of things that are out of your control as a coach. And we talk about time and time management. And I love this quote from Benjamin Mays. And I think it really fits to what you do as a coach. And it says, I only have a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up for me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. So as I think about that, I think of all the times as a coach where I probably put my time in maybe the wrong thing when I really should have been investing in my kids. And I had a great mentor as an athletic director, as a coach, and they always told me, get out and be with your kids, outside of the season, all these different things. We've got all these different things to do as coaches. And as you know, head coaches, you get bogged down with the paperwork and all doing the other stuff. And a lot of times head coaches, you lose that connection with kids because you're doing all these other things and you really just want to coach kids. So I just share that with you because it really makes me think about what's important in what we do as coaches. And that's the time that we spend with our student athletes and using this amazing platform of high school athletics to teach our kids character and, life lessons through sport. So as we coach, we always want to be perfect. And what's the perfect work-life balance? Well, that's always really tough. So I'm just going to give you a couple points here that help me in that time life work balance. And it's really hard. Coaches, ADs, it's a tough job to keep a good work-life balance. And Kurt and Joel both talking on the phone. We're here Sunday night, 7:00, and we're investing in our time to get better for our kids. But you also have families, you got loved ones. And I'll say this, we always strive to be perfect as coaches, but don't strive to be perfect with your schedule. Strive for a realistic schedule. Work-life balance is going to be realistic. And sometimes that means that you might focus on work a little bit more. And other days you might, focus on, having more time for your family or your hobbies. It is so important to schedule your time wisely. And I remember we'll talk about this a little bit later, but just being intentional with your time is so important. And then just remember that balance isn't achieved overnight. It's tough to achieve balance. I've been in this now. I know Kurt, Joel, I don't know that you ever get to be perfect at that work-life balance because there's just times where you're going to be like overwhelmed and it's going to seem stressful. And I just tell you, it's never going to be perfect. So erase that from your head. And I know we try to strive for that all the time, but just erase it from your head that you got to be perfect because you're always going to be unbalanced one way or the other. I think it's just looking at it over a long-term scope is what you really want to do to maintain that balance. But always, always, always be looking forward to spend time on the things that you love to do.
And I think sometimes in today's world, it's a little bit harder just because of social media. I think we look at that and we see people, all the things they're posting and all the things they're doing and all the awesome family things they're doing. And I mean, I look at that sometimes and go, man, I'm missing out on a lot of things, that there's awesome things that people are doing and it's unrealistic. I mean, I think we all have our own, different perspective on things and our own situations that we're dealing with. And, making sure that we're really intentional about those things that we're doing and making sure that we're establishing what's important to us. And, even going back and thinking about our why and what's really we're doing this for, and going back to, we're working for kids, but we also have our families at home and making sure that those aren't forgotten about either.
Well, and I think there's a season to things, right? There's
Yeah.
a stretch in the girls' basketball season where you have a week where it's just chaos. That first week of the season is, you're grinding until 9 o'clock at night, and then you start your practice plan for the next day, maybe then even the next morning, and you're just trying to get through it. But then, as you get into a rhythm, by the time you get to January, February, you're much more efficient, and there's a pattern, and same thing. I always joke about this, but it's the truth. My youngest son was born on August 1st on a Tuesday. And the reason I remember it was a Tuesday is because we had a team camp the weekend before, and we had a team camp the weekend after, and we scheduled it for that Tuesday. So, it didn't hurt his feelings that he was scheduled to happen in the middle of a week so that I could go to two different team camps. And but that was the season of life we were in at that time. So it just, all of those things. A friend of mine who used to coach, he played in the state semifinal on Friday afternoon, flew home, watched his son get born, flew back to Des Moines from Northwest Iowa to play in the championship game that night. So, you make it work. It's chaos, but boy, it makes for a good story.
Yeah, it does.
And I think it does get easier the longer you're coaching and in it. I mean, I think back to my times when I was a young coach and just out of school. I think I spent so much time worrying about my team and the sport and results and wanting to do well and, wanting to please people that, you can almost put too much of your time on that when, as we get older, I guess our perspective changes a little bit, and we know that, it's not so much about the results, it's about the process, and it's about the things that we're doing with kids and the experiences that we're building for them, and that they're having a great time being a part of our team. So if you're a young coach, I think it's, listen to what's being said and try to come up with some strategies to, balance that time a little bit better, and making sure that you're aware of it, though, that it's normal. I mean, everybody's dealing with it. You're not just in this alone doing it.
So our second tip here is you got to love what you do. And I don't know a group of people that love what they do more than coaches. But I always tell this to people, and it's, you don't have to love everything about what you do as a coach. Like I can think back to a lot of things as a coach, that dealing with difficult parents, doing paperwork, there's so many things in coaching that wear on you. But it needs to be more exciting enough that you don't just dread doing it. I think that's one thing. Like, when you get to the point as a coach where you're not having fun, I would tell you probably need to get out. Or you forgot, Kurt, and you made a great point, a really great point. It's, what's your why? Remember why you started doing this. And Kurt, like you said, it's not about winning the games. I mean, we all want to win as coaches. We all want to win. But at the end of the day, it's those relationships that you build with those student athletes. It's how you take your student athlete from where they are and bring them to you where they could be. And those kids don't even know sometimes what they're capable of or what they really could be. And as coaches, you see that in those kids. And that is such a special gift that coaches have, to see that potential in kids and then get them to where they need to be and what they should be doing. What a special, special gift. So don't ever forget that why. And Kurt, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is so important. When we do feel like we're, bogged down and stressed out, it's many times because we forget why we started this. And the picture on here, those student athletes being excited about, the win, the loss, or just having the opportunity to be together. They're there to have fun. And then thirdly, ask those kids, ask those people, what they want to do. And if you need to adjust your schedule, you got to look at it from a bunch of different perspectives. And Kurt made another point. Like, as a young coach, I did the same thing. Every time somebody asked me to do something, I dropped everything and did it. And I think that's important, like, that you have to have some parameters and you change if you can, but also know that you have to protect time, because to love what you do, you have to also protect some time for yourself, for the things that you love to do outside of coaching, outside of whether it's spending time with your kids or your wife or your partner or whoever that might be, family, friends, you need to have that part of you too. You can't just be coach, 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 coach all the time because you're so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's hard, especially when you're younger, to say no to things. You know, it's people want this and want that, and you feel like you need to try to keep up with the competition. So maybe there's, I have to practice so many times over break, even though, I might have some kids gone, and man, these kids, maybe they should be at practice instead of going with their families. Well, that's not the case. I mean, people should be able to, kids need to have that time off. They need to have that bond with their families, and be able to get rested up. And I think if you understand that yourself, I mean, we've got to model that for people that, we've got the right perspective on things as coaches, that we're having that right balance, because kids are watching us. Obviously, we all know that, and they're going to many times follow what we do. And we may not feel like that's the case when we're in the middle of coaching them and things aren't going well, but they are. And I think we've all had that experience of players who we've worked with in the past who reach back out and thank us for the way that we did things, or how the way that we made it a family, or that we gave them the opportunities to do other things and miss when we needed them to. So I think if we keep the right perspective and we can model that for kids, then it's only going to be a better experience for all of us.
Joel, did you have anything to add on that? You're on mute, Joel.
Sorry, you guys hit everything I would have talked about. So
Yeah. And I love this quote from Steve Jobs: the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Such a great quote. So simple, but just so poignant and to what you do as coaches. So you gotta love what you do. If you don't love this, you're not gonna. To Joel's point, when we started, most coaches, if we can get them past that 3 years, it's because they love what they do, and it's because they remember why they're doing it. Oops. All right. Next one is, for this work-life balance, you have to prioritize your health. And I'm the worst, like my time management is probably worse than anybody else's. So the fact that I'm even talking about it is probably not a good idea. But I will tell you that health is so important. So whether it's your physical, your emotional, I know we talk about mental health a lot. And when we get bogged down and we're stressed out and we've got all these, this negativity that's bearing down on us, and that's typically when we feel overwhelmed and we feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. But it's because you're not taking care of these other things, like, making time for loved ones, being with friends and family, taking care of your own, physical, emotional, and mental health should be the number one thing, because nobody's going to take care of you like you do. So if you struggle with anxiety as a coach, make sure you take time for yourself, or we're all going to run into some sort of anxiety during the season. And there's, 9 million things that can happen in the season that are tough, so don't overwork yourself, and don't let it prevent you from getting better, just, causing you further stress, because gosh dang, you got to have fun as a coach, or your kids aren't going to have fun. You are the model for your program. So when you prioritize this, your kids and coaches see that too. Your staff sees that, your kids see that. Like, it's important to take care of yourself.
I think it's important to be really intentional about scheduling those things. The exercise. I mean, I was probably as guilty of that like you were, Scott. I mean, I think it's easy to prioritize other things, and all of a sudden you get to the end of the day and it's like, oh, I'm too tired to do anything, And if when it comes to exercise, finding things that you like to do, whether it's walking and finding somebody to walk with, or anything else, that playing basketball at at the Y or whatever, that can kind of get you away from your work, but also get you that exercise that you need. And the eating part is really a challenge, I think, because don't have the time sometimes, we don't feel like to eat properly. I think we all eat, but too many
Yeah.
fast food places and different things that
Too much
aren't the best
too much
for us.
popcorn, Kurt.
Yeah. I think we could all rate the popcorn at all the places we've been to. Not sure that was healthy for us, but
No. And I would say too, just on that prioritization of your health, just make sure you're taking care of yourself, mentally too. I mean, because being a coach is hard. It's tough. You've got so many people that rely on you, and you're connected to your job 24/7. Like Kurt, Joel, how many times did you get phone calls in the middle of the night? How many times did you were on vacation and you had somebody reach out to you because you were getting ready for a tournament or a game, or you're getting ready for summer camp? I mean, you are coach every day, every hour, every minute, every second of every day.
I think that the other piece of that too is you guys both talked about the physical health, and you got to find that time for it as well. But I think as I got older, managing the emotional and mental health was more of a factor. And really for me, it wasn't so much the mental health, it was the emotional health. Because like I had an assistant for 20 years that I was at Ames High, and I was the left half of the brain, he was the right half of the brain. We weren't smart enough to have two brains, we just shared one. But it was whenever I got upset, I'd get mad, I'd start yelling, I'd start getting upset about something. He would tell some stupid joke, or he would do something funny that would make all the girls laugh. And then that would make me laugh, and I'd be like, okay, that is the right expression. Then as we got older, he's the one that he started getting more upset about things, bad call by the official, or we weren't doing something fundamental. And then whenever he'd get upset, I'd become the lighthearted one. So
Yeah.
I think that's a piece of it too, that for the emotional health of your kids, you don't always have to be the rock. You don't always have to be the emotionally stable one, but I think you got to come up with a system in your staff to be able to manage that emotional health, because so much, and this is probably more of a byproduct of coaching girls than coaching boys, is the emotional health of a team, because everything around girls revolves around emotions. And so I feel like for me, as I got older, that was something that I was better at and worse at both at the same time. Like I got better at managing it, but I was worse at reading it.
Yep.
Just because the age difference, when I was 32, I was a lot closer to the age of the kids and could read their emotions a little bit easier than when I was old enough to be their fathers. That kind of changed. So
Yeah, that's a great point. You made another good point, Joel, too, that I think is worth mentioning again, is just having somebody having that balance for you, whether it's talking to another coach. And I know Kurt has worked really hard on the mentoring program for IGCA, but having a mentor, having somebody you can reach out to when you are struggling and you're having a tough day, or you're having to deal with a difficult situation, that you have that group of people, that army of people you can reach out to and talk through things with. I think that, goes a long way. And so Joel, thanks for mentioning that. That's a great point. So our fourth topic is just unwind and unplug. And I know that's really, really hard to do as a coach, because you are so connected to what you do every day, because it's dealing with people. That's why you're connected, because you love what you do. You're connected to people, but sometimes it's good to just cut ties with the outside world and just allow yourself to just give yourself some time to reflect. I tell people this all the time. As I've gotten older, and I don't know about wiser, but older, I take time to reflect on my day. And sometimes I write stuff down and sometimes I don't, but it's made a huge difference on how I approach life. When I actually think about what happened today and what I could go back, what could I change, or how could I do it differently? Or, man, this was a really great thing that happened today, and I dealt with this really well. Sometimes we don't celebrate, the things that we do each day either, because as a coach, man, you got the checklist and you're on to the next thing. And I think secondly, unplugging can mean just something as simple as hey, you're just going to listen to a podcast, or you're going to jump on a webinar, or you like to, you know, your hobby is to go fishing. You need to unplug and do those things that you love to do outside of the coaching. A lot of people read books, you know, and I'm, again, the worst person in the world to talk about the time manager is probably me, checking my emails. You know, we'd go on vacation and I was on my phone checking email every single second. Terrible. I had to unplug and just spend that time with family. And then lastly, it's just taking that time to unwind is so crucial to your success, and it will help you feel energized. When you give yourself some time to step away and just be disengaged as a coach for a while, you'll come back and you'll be hungry again. I think sometimes as coaches, we wear that, like, we work hard. We're hardworking people and we get stuff done, but sometimes it's good to disconnect so you can come back so you're still hungry for it.
When I think of unwind, you mentioned it a little bit, Scott, but I think of this phone that's, you know, constantly in our hands and constantly, you know, connects us to people, but it also can disconnect us with where we're at and where our feet are at. And I mean, I see that with kids. I mean, when we would try to have team dinners, you know, if we didn't specifically tell the kids, put your phone away and have a conversation with your teammates, it probably didn't happen because they had to be checking who was emailing them or what was on what was the latest post on Instagram. And but honestly, coaches, we're the same way. I was an instructional coach for 8 years and had a number of meetings with teachers and stuff. And teachers we were just as bad as the kids. You know, that it's hard to get away from that electronic device, and sometimes just turning it off, putting it away, you know, not paying attention to what's going on. If somebody needs to get a hold of you, they'll get a hold of you, but taking that break, you know, even if it's a little bit longer break, especially when you're doing things that aren't school related, if you're with your family or you're having dinner or whatever, you know, unwinding from people, somebody may be trying to get a hold of me, yes, but this is where I'm at right now, and this is what I need to really focus on. So it's hard to do, though. I mean, it's personally, it's very difficult to not be thinking about what might be coming up or who I may need to be hearing from, and it's okay to feel that way, but also okay to put it away for a while.
Yeah, that's a great point about being in the moment, Kurt. That's a great point. I love that. Joe, anything to add on that one?
I was just trying to think about what Kurt said, and I think the biggest thing that I think is I've gotten better at is be where your feet are. I think that Kurt mentioned that idea of being present, because it's so easy to use that phone as a crutch. And you know, now that I've watched, you know, in the classroom, I've watched athletes, you know, that thing can be such a crutch for the kids, but also for the adults. And I think that unplugging, even if it's just, I'm going to turn off my notifications. So if I have some time, I'm going to look on my phone and I can see that I got an email, but I'm not going to let it beep at me or buzz at me every time I get a text message. You know, we've all been in those conversations when we're talking to somebody and they go, oh, and you're talking to them. And it's like, okay, you're not listening. So I always typically in that situation, I'm like, if you need to take that, go ahead. This isn't that important.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece that we got to get better at.
Yeah, that's a great point. So our fifth is just, and we've mentioned it a little bit already, but just that vacation, that time away. And we talked about this a little bit too, but there's no nobility in not taking a well-deserved break from your role as a coach. So important. You know, the benefits of taking a day off far outweigh the downsides. And Joel, you just mentioned it, you know, be where your feet are at, put your phone away, give yourself that downtime. And then again, if you prepare prior to taking that time away, and you can then take that time without worrying about, burdening your coaches, your staff, or your AD, or contending with a huge workload when you get back. That's what I always worried about, was like, okay, I'm going to get back and I'm going to have 257 emails I got to answer. because of all the things we got going on. And I would, just let that spin in my mind. And that's why I would keep checking my email so I could keep up. So when I got back, I wasn't, drowning in emails. And so, truth be told, I'm much better off. And Kurt and Joel, you both mentioned it, is just being where my feet are and getting back and just knowing I'm going to have a day or two. I'm going to have to dig through a lot of emails and I'm going to get to them. But having that disconnection would have done me a lot better than answering all those emails as I was there, not being present in the moment, not being present for those people I was with. So great. You guys have kind of touched on that already, but anything to add on that, Kurt or Joel? Oops. 6, family and friend time. Realize that no one at your school is going to love you or appreciate you the way that your family and friends do. They might love you for a minute. They might love you for what you can do for them, but just remember that your family is important and they need your time. Again, worst person in the world to talk about this. Spent so much time away from family and not get to go and meet with college friends or do whatever because so busy in a role as a coach or an athletic director, but it is so important. Get those calendar dates with your family and friends. Like, I got so much better about being intentional with my time and putting every, time I was going to spend with my daughters, time I was going to go to their games, put everything on my calendar, so that I could plan and prepare for being gone and spending the time with my family and friends I needed to. But, you're the only there's somebody there before you took your coaching position, your AD position. You should prioritize those activities or hobbies that make you happy. I remember Chuck Van Heck was one of my mentors from Muscatine, Iowa. He was like, make sure that you are putting on the calendar to go see those friends you haven't seen for a while. Put those, dates on the calendar to see your college friends or go have dinner with some of your coaching colleagues. Spend that time. It is so important that you spend time with people that love and care about you and want the best for you. Because many times as coaches, we can get put on an island and you can feel all alone. So spending that time is so, so important.
I think being intentional is really vital. I mean, Joel and I probably have maybe a little different perspective on it right now. We both just retired from education, and we went from being around all people every day, the same people and kids that we were coaching and other coaches and administrators and everything, to now all of a sudden, there's not as many people. We both have other things that we're doing, but I found that it really is important, even in retirement, to be intentional about reaching out to people, scheduling things. Hey, let's go have lunch. I mean, some of my best school friends we try to get lunch once a month and get it on the schedule so that we know that this is what's going to happen, because I think it can be easy to kind of forget those things when we get in the middle of a job or in the middle of something. And I think a lot of times people, our friends and our family don't, but people outside of that associate us with our position and with our job. And, we're much more to that than we are you know, just that. I mean, we're people, and in order for us to continue that and to keep those relationships with people, I think just being smart, scheduling, reaching out, especially when you need them. There's times that when things get a little overwhelming, reaching out to somebody, whether it's a friend, a family member, a mentor, like you were talking about before, Scott. I think everybody needs to have somebody that they can, reach out that's going to give them a boost or going to be a listening ear, and making sure that, we're scheduling those things though, and not just assuming that they're going to happen or that other people are going to reach out to us, because sometimes they may not be thinking about us or forgetting about us. And if we need them, then it's up to us to do that and reach out.
Well, and I think it's so much too in that realm of, scheduling time with your friends and family. One of the old cliches is, friends or family you choose. spending time with family during the holidays can sometimes add stress, can be a little more stressful. Whereas, you're going to go to New Year's Eve party. Like, we host New Year's Eve every year. We have friends come over and, our goal is to make it to 10 p.m. And, so we start about 3 or 4 and New Year's Eve hits for us somewhere in Nova Scotia. And so, but that night is like, some of the friends we haven't seen for a year, some of the friends we haven't seen for 6 months. We haven't sat down and, how are the kids? How's the wife? How's your dad doing? All of those things that I think is so important. Cause like Kurt said, being that I'm not actively coaching anymore. One of the things I get asked a lot is, do you miss coaching? And I say, there are parts of it I miss. I miss the time with the kids. I miss practice. And that's when a lot of the coaches that I talked to, they said, when you start not wanting to do parts of the job, that's when it's time to get out. And for me, it was the games. I really didn't enjoy the games much anymore. I enjoyed practice. I enjoyed the kids in a relationship outside of the classroom. And honestly, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was my competition, the other coaches.
Yeah.
Getting to know the other coaches, spending time with them. We always used to joke, Eric Boyle, who's now the athletic director at Waukee, when he was at Valley, he was the head girls basketball coach. He and I would joke, like, I should coach his team, he should coach my team, because we know what each other's going to do, because we'd play 2 or 3 times a year. And we would sit on the bench before the game and we would coach it up and we would ham it up and we would talk. And then during the game, we try to beat each other's brains in. And after the game, we'd go have some popcorn and talk about the family. And, those are the things that make the job much more manageable, is being able to have those relationships that allow you to kind of let your hair down and, someone you can complain to who has the same problems. Maybe they're dealing with different, sets of crazy parents, or a different kid that is not understanding their role, but they still have the same problems, if that makes sense.
That's a great point. Number 7 tip is just setting boundaries. And this is hard as coaches because, gosh, but you have to have some boundaries for yourself, for your colleagues, for your staff. You just have to do it to avoid burnout. But understand and respect your workplace limits and expectations in your role as a coach. And then lastly, try not to take calls when you're with your family. But have that conversation with your student athletes, have that conversation with your parents, have that conversation with your coaching staff. Hey, it might be like, hey, on Sunday night at 7:00, it's my family time. So, unless it's an absolute emergency, don't call me, on Sundays. Because that's going to be the time I spend with my family. And typically, if you have set that communication or that expectation with your coaches, your student athletes, your parents, typically that will, help you separate yourself, give you time to spend that time with your loved ones, but then also have just some time that you can spend and have those boundaries outside of your coaching role. I don't know if Kurt or Joel, if you have anything to add to that.
My boundaries were always, I got 2 thoughts on that. One is, one of the boundaries that I always found interesting, and I never had this situation to work through. And I say it's a situation because most of the coaches that I talk to that have coached their own children have really they've struggled with the boundary. When you walk in the front door, you're dad, you're not coach. And so that I think is an important boundary. And every coach I've talked to said coaching their kid was the greatest thing they ever did as a coach. But it came with challenges because they had to be reminded. And usually it was on their spouse to say, hey, coach, you need to leave and bring back my wife, or you need to leave and bring back my husband. Because now we're a family, we're not a basketball team. And so I think that's one thing. I think the other thing too with boundaries is also being able to separate the personal from the professional. I always told parents, you can disagree with strategy in basketball. You can disagree with who I'm playing and how much I'm playing. But I don't need your opinion. That was a boundary that was pretty firm. Now, if your daughter is struggling because your dog died last night, because she broke up with her boyfriend, grandma just got some bad news in health. Talk to me. That is a boundary we can cross every day of the week and twice on Sunday, because it's about the relationships with your athlete, and that is paramount to everything else. And so, that sometimes got into a gray area of whether that was something I should be dealing with or not. Whether it was, and this was all before phones became such a thing, that now you got to worry about the conversations that you have on your phones and the text messages and the communication between athletes and coaches. And you got to be very conscientious about that. But so I think that's another piece that has gotten more complicated in today's world, and you just got to come up with a plan. Whether that's, we're going to be using Remind, we're going to be using Band, we're not going to send text messages to coach personally. There always need to be somebody else set up in that chat. That's fine. That's great. And I think it's important, because that is also part of that. But I think as a coach, you got to say, okay, this is beyond my capabilities now as your coach. This is something I'm not willing to tackle. And like my boundary was always, when it got into a mental health issue, I'm not a counselor. I can help you with relationships. I can help you talk through problems. But if you're struggling with your mental health, I want to bring in a therapist. I want to get a counselor. That's not my job. And I don't want to, and it's not that I'm not concerned about your mental health, but that's not my area. So I always felt like that's a boundary I'm not going to cross. But, in all of that, it can be tricky. So I'll let you talk, Kurt.
No, that was all well said. I don't have much more to add other than, it's agreed 100% setting up what your boundaries are and what your expectations are, and then communicating that. I think sometimes as coaches, we don't either clarify what some of these things mean, or don't, get the information out to the people that really need to have it. And if we don't communicate, here's what I believe, and here's what I need from you, and making that clear, then that's where some issues can come up. So I just think the communication part's a huge piece of setting those boundaries.
That's a great point. Yeah. And lastly, 8 is just setting those goals. And Kurt, you talked, a little bit about this, but your goals, your priorities, what are your values? Set those goals. And then you got to stick to them. So setting achievable goals, and then implementing your time management strategy. So whatever that is, whether it's your to-do list, whether it's, cutting out stuff that you really don't have to deal with. And, Joel, you mention something that, brings me back to this, but when you get into that role for a while, you're like, well, I don't really need to do that. I was spending this time and it really didn't add any value to my program. So why do I continue to do it? So that was a great point that you made. And then intentionality. And I remember somebody asked me this question. So like, how are you intentional as a coach? And I just had this awkward pause and I had to think about it. But it was literally, and Kurt, Joel, you both mentioned it, getting it on my calendar. And I know that we get things that pop up on us that might get bumped to a later time, but when I had it on my calendar, it really gave me that, like, I'm going to prioritize that at that time. Or if I can't, I'm going to be able to come back to it because I got it on my calendar, and it might not happen today, but then I'm going to bump that to the next day. But setting time to, have practice, whether you're learning like you are tonight, or whether you're leading your program versus just managing it. So, and I think that's such a huge distinction. Like, we want to lead our programs, not just manage our programs. And that takes so many people, and coaches are so good about creating team and culture that we need to do that for ourselves too, outside of just our team with our, basketball team, football team, volleyball team, baseball, softball, whatever team that might be. But just make sure that you're intentional with your time. It's the one thing that we cannot get enough of. We can't buy more. It might be the most precious commodity that we own is our time. So using it wisely is so important, and being intentional, which Joel and Kurt, you have both mentioned that numerous times tonight, just the intentionality of your time, being present in the moment, and how important that is in your role as a coach.
Yeah, I think it's, when it comes to coaching, I think it can get overwhelming sometimes trying to figure out how am I going to get all these things done and what am I, how do I get time to do other things and to have free time and the vacation time, even like we were talking about. And, so I guess I would just recommend think of strategies that will help you as coaches, prioritize what's really important. Something we used to use with as an instructional coach with teachers to kind of get them to think about what was important was I think it was called the Eisenhower Matrix. It came up from President Eisenhower just to help troops kind of get their things organized. It was basically taking your to-do list, all the things that you have to do, and then make a quadrant, a square, but make a quadrant out of it with 4 different different parts of it. And the first one was, is it a task that's urgent and important? Is it a task that's not urgent, but it's important? And then one that's urgent or not important, or not urgent and not important, and if you really write these things out and then kind of place them in one of those quadrants, you can start to see, okay, man, there's some of these things I'm doing. What am I even worrying about? This isn't anything that I don't need to do this for 3 months, or I may never need to do this, or hey, this is the one that really stands out as something that I've got to take care of. Anything I think we can do to kind of organize what we've got going on. I'm a big believer in writing things down, and I've posted notes all over my desk and different things, to try to keep track. But you said it too, intentional about how I'm looking at things and what I'm doing then to complete some of those tasks or to not worry about some of those tasks, I think are something that we really need to consider as a good strategy to help us with that work-life balance.
Yeah, I think it's really important too, like, again, this goes back to prioritizing your time, right? Setting those boundaries. I remember for probably 15 years, when my kids were really young, we would go to early service church on Sunday mornings at 8:30, and then they would go to Sunday school, and I would go to the coffee shop, and I would work on getting my scouting report ready for Tuesday's game. Like that was the routine. That was the time I allotted myself. So I had 1 hour to get it done. So I couldn't screw around with my emails. I couldn't screw around with whatever. So like that was how I was able to prioritize. And I think about a lot of times I would want to enter my stats from Friday night's game, and Kurt, that goes back to that Eisenhower matrix, because I would say, wait a minute, stats aren't important right now. Stats are important on Monday. They are not important on Sunday, because in the life of a basketball coach, you got to have everything ready. So that was always where I would have that idea of, okay, stats are important, but they are not urgent. By Monday, they become urgent, and now they move into that new quadrant. So I think that's an important thing, is kind of figure out that process, because this was one of the things I was just telling my one of our young teachers in our building. We were at a Christmas party, and I said, I used to want to have 8th period prep as a coach, because I needed that so I could get ready for basketball practice, or if we had to leave early for games or whatever. But as a teacher, I hated 8th period prep, because all I did was basketball stuff during 8th period prep. And so I would lose that time as a teacher. Well, I had to make that up somewhere else, or I would lose that time as a dad, or, and have to make that up somewhere else. And so there's give and take. And ultimately, I think being able to prioritize and set those goals of what you're going to do during this time, Sunday night from 6 to 7, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to focus on planning my week and planning bus trips and, communications out to the team. That way they get their weekly notification. I think those are important to be able to prioritize. And I think if you can prioritize at that 1 hour a week, that can make the rest of the week better, which then makes the rest of the season better. And I think that's really where it comes into play, is being able to just figure out what's important now, what's important later, what's important overall. And because again, and this is something I've always believed firmly in, life is about seasons. There's a season of life when you got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home, and you're in the thick of it. And then your kids, all of a sudden you turn around 5 days later and they're 16 and 14 and on their phones all the time. And, and so life changes, and there's a season of life when it's easier to do X or Y, and there's a season of life when it's easier to do Z. And so being able to say, okay, right now at this season in my life, this is what I can do, and this is what I can't do. And then being able to prioritize those things, I think, is really key.
Well, we've come to an end already. It went quickly. So thank you. I love this quote from Billy Graham: "A coach will impact more young people in 1 year than an average person does in a lifetime." So thank you for what you do. Thanks for the work that you do with your student athletes each and every day. You definitely make a positive impact on your kids. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, the coaches who jumped online tonight, and those of you who are watching this on recording. We wanted to mention that the recording link will be available pretty quickly in the next week or so. We'll get this out. We have just set up for the IGCA their own YouTube page, so soon that link will be able to be watched on YouTube. So please pass it on to anyone else that you may know that may want to watch it, and hopefully gains at least one thing from it. That's kind of our goal, is to, even if there's one thing that you get out of the webinars that we have, then it was worthwhile your time. We do plan to do future webinars. Right now we're looking at one a month, and as soon as we have those finalized, we'll get that word out to coaches throughout the state. And if you have any ideas on topics or other things that you would like us to maybe take a look at in these webinars, please send them my way. And or you can even still put them in the chat here yet tonight.
Are there any questions from anyone? That nothing was entered into the chat, so I don't know if this is going to be something that creates a lot of questions, but certainly we would entertain any if there are any.
Yeah, I think it can always be questions. It can be ideas or things that you're doing or things that you've experienced that you want to share. I think as we keep moving forward, I think these will turn into a lot of, what's out there, and people sharing ideas and being able to connect coaches and see what other people are doing. I think we all are very, very good at stealing other people's ideas. I think I was as good at that as anybody. And if it's a good idea, it's well worth using. And if it's going to affect our lives and make it better, or those athletes that we coach, then it's well worth it. Well worth a little bit of time.
Okay, well, we want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Like Kurt said, we've created a YouTube channel, so we can just post these on there, and we'll post the link to the YouTube channel and to the videos that we put out, and we'll add those as we go. Oh, good. Here a question came in. I think I'm as curious about structures and logistics as much as anything. I feel like it's all the extra stuff, weights, film, youth program, etc., that winds up consuming a lot of time and mental energy. I'd love to hear how others address those without being overwhelmed. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer, because those are the things that really drove me nuts as well. Not so much film. I loved watching film. I loved watching film with our kids. I loved breaking down film. I loved watching film with kids when we could watch it. They didn't love it, but I did. So that was one thing. I think it also helps in some of these other ideas, and it's tougher at smaller schools than at bigger schools. But if you've got a weights coach in your school, certainly tap into them, see if they can help you design a program or even run it for you while you're in season, and just say, okay, Mondays and Wednesdays, we're in the weight room. Coach Johnson's going to be there. He's going to run the program. I was there every single time. I was there for every single minute of weights, but I wasn't in charge. That took a lot of pressure off of me because, I'm in charge of every minute of practice, in charge of every minute of every game, in charge of the locker room, in charge of the off season, in charge of camp, in charge of And those are the things that if you can turn some of those things over, I think that's a huge benefit. You know, if you can find somebody to help you run the youth program, to, you know, handle some of the logistics, not so much the coaching side of things or those kind of things, but maybe someone who can handle the running your youth tournament. You know, you know, I always used to tell the guy who ran our youth program, I'll be there an hour and a half before to set up. I'll be there until we're done, but I just want to be there, and, you know, I'll jump in and referee, I'll sweep the floor. I just don't want to be in charge that day. You know, so those kinds of things that you can turn over to other people, I think that's something that can really help with a lot of the mental energy. Kurt, what are some things you've got?
Yeah, you kind of took one of my main ideas. I think as a head coach, it's delegating sometimes. I think I did a better job of that as I got older. I think when I was younger, I tried to do everything for everybody. And I think part of it was I thought I could do the best job of it. And I wanted to get it done and get it done right. So I wasn't going to hand it off to anybody. And I think as I got older, one, I got tired a little faster and needed some help with things. So, but the other part of it was if I had an assistant, you know, I wanted them in charge of something. Like with basketball, I had my assistants. Either one was in charge of out of bounds plays, one was in charge of sideline out of bounds plays. I mean, and when the game was going on, if we needed about out of bounds play, I looked at them. What are you calling? You know, and when you delegate and you give people responsibilities, then you have to make sure you follow through and let them have those responsibilities. I think sometimes we can delegate as head coach and say, okay, I need you to do this. And then all of a sudden, if we jump in and override them and say, no, you should have run this, then you're not doing anything. And I just feel like, one, it takes, if you're delegating more things, it takes things off your plate. But two, it also builds leadership in them. I mean, I think part of the thing is that if we're a head coach, that we should be doing is building up our assistants and get them to want to be the next head coach, or, you know, a head coach in something. So there's no easy answer. I think it goes back to what we talked about in the slides about figuring out what's important, what things really do I need to be doing and what needs to be done in the time frame, and then making sure that I'm, you know, maybe I'm taking care of those, but some of these other things that maybe aren't quite as important, then, you know, as Joel said, get somebody else involved that can help out and help build their capacity. It's a great question though, because I think many people have those same concerns. So are there any other questions that anybody has or ideas on ideas on the question? Shoot them our way.
All right. Well, we're at an hour. That seems to be a pretty good time frame. So we want to thank everybody for coming. And we appreciate everybody for being a part of things. We're looking forward to being able to offer these once a month, maybe twice a month, various, you know, beginning of the season, end of the season. We were brainstorming earlier tonight about some topics we can use going forward, whether that be end of season checklist to go through, how to run a banquet, how to start your season, select teams, deal with parents. All of those things are topics we hope to address and try to make this something practical that people can use, so that we can get people who impact people's lives to stick around longer, because so many times great coaches get out sooner than they should because something's not right with their school district, with their program, with you know, their work-life balance. Those things can really throw us off. So we really appreciate you all coming tonight, and we look forward to continuing this program throughout the year and going forward. Thanks for coming, everybody.